This is a place called Forest Park that I come to all the time. It's more forest than park. It's actually one of the largest forested areas in an urban environment all of America, 5,000 square acres. And I love it because it's tucked right up against downtown Portland. I get here in 5 minutes. And I come here on a regular basis to clear my head, go for a run or a walk, think, pray, talk to God. And every time I'm here, I think about the Garden of Eden. This is what I imagine it to be like, rich and lush and primal and teeming with beauty. Over the last 4 sessions, we have been talking about the Garden of Eden and about what God intended not only for male-female relationships, but for creation as a whole. But this whole time, I have been assuming that the end goal is marriage. What if it's not? Actually, for the first time in American history, there are more unmarried people than married people. That is a seismic shift in American culture. The odds are that if you're watching this, you're not Adam and Eve, you're Adam or Eve. You're single, you're not married. But it may surprise you that the New Testament actually has a lot to say about singleness. After all, Jesus was single, and what it says is probably not what you're expecting. There's actually a whole chapter in the Bible written to people who aren't married. It's in 1 Corinthians, one of several letters Paul wrote to the church in Corinth. About halfway through the letter, Paul starts fielding questions from the Corinthians. And guess what the questions are about? Loveology. There were questions about porneia, or sexual immorality, and sex between married couples, and marriage, and divorce, and of course, singleness. After all, the church was made up of followers of Jesus, and Jesus was single, which is interesting. As followers of Jesus, our agenda is to become more and more like Jesus every day. In light of that, it's an actual interesting question. Should we get married at all? And Paul's answer is surprising. He writes this, "I wish that all of you were as I am." Now, Paul was single, but each of you has your own gift from God. One has this gift, and another has that. To Paul, marriage is a gift and singleness is a gift. You may have the gift but not want the gift. You may have the gift for a time but not forever. Or you may be widowed, like we think maybe Paul was, or divorced and get the gift later in life. The word gift is charisma in Greek. It's where we get the English word charismatic. It's a spark, a drive, a passion to do something. But it's also from the root word charis, meaning grace. In Paul's theology, grace is God's empowering presence deep in your bones, animating you from the inside out to do what he's put in front of you. And this language of charisma or gift is used all over Paul's writings. It's a calling and ability to participate in God's kingdom in a special and unique way. Now, maybe you have the gift of singleness. Maybe you have the calling and ability from God to live single in order to contribute to God's kingdom in a greater capacity. For followers of Jesus, the point of singleness isn't freedom from responsibility. It's freedom for more responsibility. Paul thinks it's great if you stay single. At one point in the letter, he says he thinks it's better than marriage. But Paul isn't saying you should delay adulthood, abdicate responsibility, work part-time, go surfing every day, travel a bit, and do nothing but tool around for 10 years of your life. Does that sound anything like the gospel of Jesus to you? To Paul, the point of singleness is to serve God in ways you just can't do if you're married. My friend John said no to dating an amazing girl because he wanted to live in the developing world for a few years. He's an engineer, and he got a job with a nonprofit building wells in Mozambique. For 3 years, he lived truly on the back of a motorcycle, traveling from village to village. At night, he would camp out in the bush in the middle of nowhere, and then each day he would show people how to get clean water. It was an amazing experience. But it would have been really hard to do with a wife and family. Doable, but it's not easy to put 3 kids on the back of a dirt bike in the middle of Africa. He made a smart decision to do that single in order to follow God's call. And God gave him the grace, the empowering presence to do it. Now he's back in the country and he's engaged to be married. If you have this gift, even if you just have it for a while, for a year or 2 or 3 like John, then don't waste time with romance. Do what God's put in your heart. Here's what you need to understand. Singleness is a good thing, really. The word charisma can be translated blessing. It's not a curse, and it's not plan B. In the church, sometimes we make people who aren't married feel like the JV team, like they never really made it. If you're in your 20s and single, the odds are people ask you all the time, are you dating anybody? Do you know anybody? Think of anybody? Like anybody? And people are well-meaning, but the subliminal message is, when are you going to get married and actually start life like the rest of us? Listen, life doesn't start when you get married. It starts the second you fold your story into the larger story of the kingdom of God and follow Jesus forward. And Jesus was single. So was Paul, the leading theologian in the New Testament. And that's saying something. And both of these men see singleness as a gift. This is something we have to think about and wrestle with. My grandparents, Bill and Ruth Comer, married right in the middle of World War II. They were together for 3 days after the wedding before he shipped out to Guam as the captain of the B-24. But here's what's crazy. She was 19 and he was 20, and that was normal. Most of that generation married right out of high school. But today, the median age for marriage in the US is right around 27 for women and 28 for men. That means you will spend a decade between graduation from high school and marriage, on average. And that's for those of you who actually get married. We've elongated the time lapse between adolescence and adulthood, and in doing so, we've made the waiting period longer than ever before. Think about the ramifications of that for sexuality. It wasn't that long ago that people married at more like 15 or 16, not that long after sexualization. But now we're asking people to go 10 or 15 years longer and not have sex. Now that's doable, but it's hard. But it's just a fact of life. You may think that the growing delay of marriage is a good thing or a bad thing. You may get married young, like myself, or later in life, but either way, waiting is a part of life. There's always something on the horizon just out of your reach. The trick is to learn how to wait well. In the Hebrew Psalms, wait is a verb. It's something you do. You wait on God. Yes, you will have to wait, but that doesn't mean you have to tread water. Do something with your life. Go to college, travel the world, get letters after your name, write a novel, start a business or a nonprofit or both. Move to the developing world and serve the poor. Try something, fail, try again. Follow that part of your heart that you're scared to let out. Just do something that matters in the long run. Something that's about more than you and your dream. That's about God's inbreaking kingdom. Partner with God for the healing of the world. The reality is that there's so much work to be done right now. Before you ever meet him or her, or get married, or graduate, or whatever it is you're waiting for. There's so much that has to happen in your life to shape you into the kind of man or woman who's ready for the future. More important than finding your spouse is becoming the kind of person who's ready to get married. We expend so much time and energy dreaming about finding the perfect man or woman when we should be working hard to become the kind of man or woman Jesus is calling us to be. How you live right now matters. Right now, you are becoming your future. That's why the months or years or decades of waiting are so vital. You're building the foundation, and how you build, how you live in the here and now matters more than you know. Life doesn't start when you get married, or when you graduate, or get a job, or reach a goal, or whatever it is that you're waiting for. You're alive now. Start doing good right where you're at and watch your story unfold. The Bible is filled with humor. Sadly, most of it's lost in translation, but there's a story in Genesis that I think is both funny and tragic. It's the story of Jacob and Rachel and Leah. Jacob is the grandson of Abraham, which means his life is filled with calling, but he's an idiot. And Hebrew's name means heel snatcher, which was an ancient idiom for a liar or a deceiver. And that's exactly what Jacob is. He deceives his father Isaac, then he deceives his brother Esau, and then in an ironic twist, he is deceived by his father-in-law Laban. After working for 7 years for Laban to pay the bride price for Rachel, he wakes up the morning after the wedding and the text says, quote, "Behold, in the morning it was Leah." Now, here's the backstory. There are two sisters. Rachel, Genesis says, was beautiful in form and face, end quote. Meaning her body was incredible from top to bottom, and so was her face, beautiful. And Jacob was in love with Rachel. In fact, this is the first story in the entire Bible of what we would call romantic love. It's not an arranged marriage. It's deep feelings of affection. Jacob is crazy in love with Rachel. Leah, the other sister, isn't beautiful. In fact, the text says she had sore eyes. That's a gracious Hebrew way of saying she's ugly. And Jacob, after waiting and working his tail off for 7 years, wakes up the next morning and behold, it's sore eyes. Life's like that, isn't it? You wait and you work and you dream and you hope and you finally get to the day, what you were waiting for, and behold, in the morning, it was Leah. It's a letdown. It's good, but it's not all it's cracked up to be. And life is full of letdowns, disappointment, disillusionment. But here's what I love about the story. Leah ends up being an incredible wife. She is faithful and steady. She gives Jacob 8 sons in a culture where male seed was everything. Rachel, on the other hand, is kind of a drama queen. Her character doesn't match or line up with her beauty, and she's barren in a culture where that was thought of as a curse from God. Now, in the end, God is gracious, and she has 2 sons. And together, all of Jacob's children make up the 12 tribes of Israel. But listen to this. The tribe of Judah comes from Leah. That's the tribe of the kings, David, Solomon, Hezekiah, Josiah, all the way down to the Messiah, Jesus. Jesus comes from Leah. Get that? The fact is, God's in the letdowns of life. Even in a polygamous marriage that was nothing close to what God intended in the garden, God was there at work. His thread of redemption runs all the way through the tapestry of life. Maybe your dream was to get married by 22, but now you're 28 or 30 or 40 and you're not married yet. Or maybe your dream was to get married by 22 and you did, but now you're 28 or 30 or 40 and your marriage isn't all you hoped it would be. Listen, keep your eyes open for God. He does some of his best stuff through Leah, through the letdowns of life. And don't forget that marriage at its best is no more than a signpost pointing forward to the resurrection. Jesus said clearly that there is no marriage in the age to come. You're with God forever, and that's all you need. This means that everything we covered over the last 4 sessions, love, marriage, sex, relationships, it's all penultimate. At its best, it's a shadow, a glimpse of what's coming in the future. And trust me, it's better than you can possibly imagine. The scriptures end with the wedding of heaven and earth. Have you ever read the last 2 chapters of the Bible and noticed all the Eden imagery? On either side of the river was the tree of life. Its leaves were for the healing of the nations. No longer will there be any curse. They will reign forever and ever. This future world, the one that's breaking in through Jesus and one day will come in force, is like the garden, only better. It's not just a garden, it's a garden-like city. It's not just Adam and Eve, it's every tribe and tongue and nation. And it's not just marriage between a man and a woman, it's all of humanity locked in relationship for life. So wherever you're at, single, married, lonely, in love, wherever you're coming from, a place of pain and regret and shame, or a place of hope and eager anticipation for what's coming around the bend, life with another human being. It's amazing. Either way, know that life is a gift, all of it, every last drop. God created it all, love, marriage, sex, romance, and it's all good and it's all for you to enjoy. My hope and prayer is that you do so well. Live the life that God intended you to live. Live the way of Jesus, what one writer calls the life that is truly life. But know that nothing in the world can fill the gaping void left in your heart by God's departure from Eden. Not the best marriage, not the best sex, not the best romance. None of it. Don't get me wrong, it's all incredible, but it's not God. So when the letdowns come, and trust me, they will come, know that this life in its best moments is nothing more than a signpost pointing forward to the age to come. Maybe that's why in the last paragraph of the Bible, it ends with Jewish wedding imagery. The closing line is, "The Spirit and the bride say, come." A Jewish bride would never know the exact day of her wedding. All she knew is that her lover was coming soon. In the language of Jesus, at an hour she did not expect. And so she would live with one eye out the window on the horizon, waiting. You know, that's really not a bad way to live all of life.